Hello. Today I am here with former second trombone, the Boise Philharmonic, Talon Smith. I'm going to be asking him a few questions about running a trombone studio as well as teaching private lessons. So the first question is, why do you want to teach trombone?
Sure. Yeah. There's so many different reasons. Obviously, the obvious thing is, music is a wonderful thing. We want to keep perpetuating music. And so, by teaching trombone through the vehicle that I know best, trombone, I'm able to do that as best as I can. But I think more so, teaching trombone and music in general, I think it's not only good for, learning music, performing music, but I think the more you work on an instrument or studying music, the more you work on yourself as a person. So I like to think that even though I'm teaching trombone, and that's all fine and dandy, you're also teaching somebody how to be a better person. So I think that's why overall I like to teach trombone and just music in general.
Great. Next question is, what qualifications do you have when teaching trombone?
Yeah, qualifications.
Yeah.
Yeah. I suppose um, the paper qualifications. I suppose. So I have a bachelor's degree and a master's degree from Southern Oregon University and University of Oregon, respectively. So during my time in both programs, I was able to attend master classes and have a somewhat of a studio as I was studying at the same time, and so just sort of over time honing those skills, and then what experience I've had after I graduated and all that. So
Great. Next, how do you structure your lessons?
I think I try to it's really dependent on the student. I kind of have like a student by student sort of process. So mostly we just I guess in general we'll sort of start out with some simple warm up thing, something that's nice that isn't that allows them to sort of approach the instrument, not really think too technically, just something that gets the air moving, that's nice and slow and flowing, something that just sort of gets them all ready to go. And then we start to move on to more technical exercises, maybe some solo rep if they're studying solo rep. An hour long lesson is when you first start hour long lessons, you think they're really long, but then once you start getting into the minutia, it's you find that your time runs out with those three things. So
All right. How do you handle different skills?
different skills. So I think, um, well, in general, I suppose I try to approach trombone teaching sort of like a gosh, I don't know how do I want to how do I want to answer the question. I guess I approach skills. So like through different most students are somewhere between like fifth or sixth grade in high school. So obviously those at younger ages are going to have a lower skill overall. So I try to make the trombone production of sound and musicality something that's really easy to students. So I guess so. Starting with younger students, we'll sort of do. I guess it's kind of ear training. They don't really realize that it is, but we'll do a lot of call and answer. We don't actually look at a lot of music, surprisingly enough. It's just to try to get them around the horn, feel comfortable, and that way when we start introducing music, it's less of a it's a little less scary, I suppose. I try not to pull out the sheet music, right at the beginning of things, I suppose, if that makes sense. And then for higher level students, the more that they're more technically proficient on the instrument, the more we get to talk about music and musical concepts overall, which I think is the real exciting stuff about trombone. That it's less we have to mind about, positions and no accidentals and all that stuff. We can talk about music and really kind of transcend our vehicle, which is the trombone, if that makes sense.
Great. How do you motivate students?
Motivation's tough. I think when we are in sort of music study mode, um, I think sometimes the overall joy of music making sometimes gets hidden by the fact that you're like actively working on an instrument. And so I think motivation comes from keeping the trombone fun and finding fun in playing. So I always, over the past couple of years with trombone playing, I try to instill in the students something that I've come to find, sort of, um, reforming a relationship with instrument, I suppose, which is, when we say playing trombone, I mean play in like the true sense of play, something it's like spontaneous, it's fun. And I think if something is spontaneous and fun, it makes you want to do it more. And so I try to keep that spirit in lessons. And so ideally, hopefully, when students experience that, they want to leave lessons and they want to continue playing and have fun on their instrument and, explore, their curiosities about the instrument. So I think that's kind of my angle on it.
All right. How do you address performance anxiety?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I am. This is going to kind of come as a question to you, James. Have you heard of a book called The Inner Game of Tennis?
No, I haven't.
You haven't. Highly recommend it. So, performance anxiety. I've sort of gotten into this idea, which I'll try to keep it not long-winded. But there's a book called The Inner Game of Tennis, which is like kind of like my Bible, I suppose. I used to have a lot of performance anxiety, and so essentially, gosh, how to boil it down. Um, you sort of have two selves. You have one self that's like really kind of like an A personality and really tries to control a situation, and you have another self that is sort of the creative, yet trapped sort of self. And so the idea is to try and let that sort of A type personality, try to find something to just distract it to allow that like true musicality and talent to bloom. And so that's sort of my overall philosophy. I guess you'd have to read the book to really sort of dig in. But I guess overall anxiety comes from a place of ill preparedness. So I think the best way to combat anxiety is to be as prepared as possible. So naturally, you can know your music totally, you can have your music memorized. There's always going to be some anxiety. I think deep down that just means you care about what you do, which is totally fine. I don't think you can ever totally get rid of anxiety, but I guess just overall preparedness. And with all things, the more that you do it, the more familiar it becomes and the less scary it is, I suppose. So I guess there's a lot of different answers within that.
That's really good advice for performance anxiety. How do you communicate with parents or guardians?
I guess fairly direct. With when I teach trombone, usually usually parents, they don't really know. How do I want to say? I guess a lot of them don't really understand music, or they're just kind of having their kid do it, or the kid wants to do it. So usually they're kind of hands off in my experience. And so one thing with trombone teaching, or teaching music in general, is teaching students how to self-advocate for themselves. And so I think overall with parents, it's been pretty, I guess pretty direct, but usually the students are the ones talking to their parents, I want to say. So I'm trying to think. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I like to think I'm a friendly person, so I'm easy to approach, and I think just being friendly to folks in general is a good way of communication. I don't know. So,
All right. How do you handle discipline or behavioral issues?
um, that I think I haven't really had too many issues with that. I want to say, um, you know, obviously everybody, all students, we don't know what they're going through exactly. So if there is a behavioral issue, I never tried to take anything personally. I think sometimes it'll kind of modify your lesson a little bit depending on how, if they've had a good day or a bad day. But I always try to meet the student where they're at, and I try to, maybe use that lesson time to sort of encourage them a little bit. But yeah, as far as discipline goes, I'm not one of those folks who are gonna, end a lesson or something. Like if the student's like acting out, I'm really curious about, I'll like ask them, what's going on. Luckily, I haven't had to do that very often, but it's a good time to sort of, I'm not shy about stepping into like a counselor role, so to speak. So, if something's going astray, I'll try to, get to the bottom of it in a friendly way. So, I guess.
Well, I'm getting to a point that students usually behave at lessons
Mm-hmm.
and they're, on task and doing what they're supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I always do.
Yep.
All right. What resources do you use for teaching?
Um, resources. So, I mean, I've had I have a million etude books from just my own personal studies. So obviously, a lot of that. Um, I mean, there's a million different resources. We'd be here all day listening to them all. But I think one thing that I'm trying to incorporate more, we're starting to get into more, technology is a huge thing these days. Wasn't so much when I was really young. So I'm trying to find a way to incorporate that more. So I use one thing that students really enjoy is I have this app called, what is it called? I just know the icon. I've forgotten what it's called apparently. But it's a drum track. And there's a lot of million different really funny and cool fun tracks on it. And so I like to break that out as a sort of an exercise to, metronomes are nice and dandy, but if you're practicing like tuba mirum or something to like some like metal blast beats or something, it's really fun. It's totally different. A lot of students really enjoy that because it kind of breaks the monotony of like Dr. Beat or something like that. Um, but yeah, I think resources are for me are pretty standard for what most use. But yeah, I think I picked up a lot of stuff at ITF this past summer, and like duet fundamentals or something along those lines. Students really enjoy those. So I don't know. I'm constantly building those resources. So I hope that answers that.
Well, that's a pretty helpful tool for students to stay in time. It's
Mm-hmm.
obviously like a metronome.
Yeah.
All right, final question.
Mm-hmm.
How do you promote your studio?
That's probably one of the things that I'm not super strong at. I think, somebody who maintains sort of a professional career and, like a playing career, I suppose, a freelancing career, time is fairly limited for me. So I'm not really in the mode of like trying to get my name out there necessarily or my studio. It's just kind of where I'm at in the stage of my life right now. So students, a lot of the students that I get are just off of recommendations from other trombonists in the area who maybe also don't have time, or the Treasure Valley is pretty big, so students or instructors saying like, hey, the student lives like in Caldwell, you live in Nampa, or at least I used to. So location is a big deal as well. But yeah, I'm not out there selling my wares, as it were. I think I'm sort of a word of mouth. In the past, I've contacted band directors. I've linked up with music stores like Dunkley's for a little while after when I first moved here, because a lot of folks, they'll say, "Oh, where do we get lessons?" And they go, well, let's go to the music store. They ought to know. So that's kind of how it's been these days. Yeah.
All right. Those are pretty interesting stories. Thanks for being here, Talon. I appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks for interviewing me.
Of course.